Hey everyone, I'm Chase, founder of Oak and Oscar. Welcome to the next episode of The Watch Table. I'm excited to welcome our next guest. Joe is a loving father, paramedic with the Chicago Fire Department, vintage car nut, photographer, and a guy that loves learning all the little details about anything he does. He's always got a good story to tell, and it's a real pleasure to have him here with me. Joe, welcome to The Watch Table.
Thank you for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. So the first question that I have for you is, why do you love watches?
You know, I guess the industrial art aspect of it. I love these little machines that are beautiful to look at in their own details, but also that have an actual purpose and function.
Sure.
I originally got into wristwatches from my work. Oddly enough, even in grade school, I carried around pocket watches, and I was like the only kid.
Pocket watch in grade school.
Yeah. I mean, like my 8th grade graduation, I have a pocket watch in my vest. Like I was a nerd. I love that stuff. But when I got into EMT school, like my basic EMT school, they required you to have a wristwatch for checking pulses. So that's how I got into wearing a wristwatch. Now that's all I wear. So I also appreciate the functionality of watches.
And I think it leads us actually to a watch that we can talk about first, which was actually the Humboldt GMT, which
Yes.
I know is a very special watch for you, almost by accident, in the sense that the serial number that you got, number 4,
Right,
if you don't mind
correct.
me sharing that.
Not at all.
Happens to match up with was it the first ambulance you were in?
Correct, yes. Now the first my first ambulance with the city of Chicago was ambulance 4. That was my first assigned out of the academy, and I was there for 11 years. So bulk of my career was spent at that ambulance, and I have a lot of fond memories. And I like wearing these watches at work, the Oak and Oscars in particular. So when I got that watch and I noticed number 4 is the serial number, I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. I love that story, and you shared that story with me, along with the story you shared with me. I believe you brought your daughter to our old HQ. You were looking at some watches. You told me how your Oscar connection is actually, you have a Vizsla who's now almost 12, named Oscar.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of why I fell in love with your brand, because there's multiple levels of connection.
Bourbon.
The bourbon. Dogs, right. I've got my own
not been in
Oscar.
an ambulance though. I haven't had that.
That's a good thing. Hopefully that stays that way. It's better to be in it while being paid to be there than the other, for sure. So the Chicago aspect, the Oscar part, the Oak part, all kind of meshed together.
You've always been into watches, and it sounds like your family's been into watches, and I know that you do have a piece that's important to you that was given to you by your grandfather.
Yeah, so this Gerard Perregaux, this is an interesting brand in that I think they're credited with having the first mass-produced wristwatch. Some German Kaiser ordered a number of watches for the military. But yeah, this was his watch. It was from sometime in the 40s. I'm assuming he bought this after World War II. Like a lot of soldiers coming home and picked up things like that. Right. Nice to wear dressed up or special occasions, just as a reminder of him.
I love that. That's what is one of the things I love about watches, is they're kind of generational.
Yeah.
And they become others' watches in the future. You have a pattern of when you have a child, and you have 3, is
Correct.
to have a watch that you purchase kind of in their honor.
Yes. My first daughter was, when we found out my wife was pregnant, my first one, I bought Longines. Second one, because they got to be fair, got to be even, right?
Absolutely.
You can't.
Yeah.
So each kid, bought a Longines.
They all have Longines waiting for them. Now this Longines is a fun one.
Yes.
In the sense that it actually has an error on the dial.
Correct.
And this is a true error. It has a true error that the subdials goes 5, 10, 15, 20, 20, 30.
Correct, yeah.
Which is a whoops. A fun story, because that can happen in the watch world. And the producers making the dials, they don't catch it. Designing the dials, they don't catch it. Actually assembling, and they don't catch it. And then here's an example of one that got in the wild.
Yeah.
And then there's another watch that you brought as well, which is a really great Seiko World Timer.
Yes.
That folks think it's an error, but in fact, it was just the way time zones were done back in this 1 or 2 year range.
Yeah, so what was interesting about this watch, in 1968, the UK decided to try this. It was like the Traffic Safety Board in the UK decided they wanted to try out this experiment. The theory was that eliminating daylight savings time would lower fatalities involved in vehicle accidents. The thought being that going to work in the morning or going to school in the morning, it's a direct route. So there's a lot more movement in the evening, so it'd be more important to have that extra daylight on the back half of the day than the beginning. And so in 1968, they didn't do daylight savings time, and they carried that through until the beginning of 1972. So these Seikos actually placed London in the same time zone as Paris, Rome. And people typically think that this is a misprint dial, but it's actually historically accurate because all the ones made from 68 to 71 reflect that change.
What I think I like almost, especially as I'm listening to this, is from the paramedic perspective, I don't know if you bought it partially because of that, with the idea of the accident avoidance.
Well,
I don't know if there's some play
there
in
is a bit of connection because we were actually, the field of paramedicine as a whole came about in the late 60s and early 70s as a result of the rising car accident fatalities as more and more motorists were on the roadways and getting into these like pretty bad accidents. We were originally governed under the traffic, like the Department of Traffic or whatever, like, and then eventually got switched over to the Illinois Department of Public Health. But we were under IDOT.
I can see the budget planning now. Potholes, paramedics.
Right.
That's
exactly.
great.
So yeah, so that kind of ties.
I love it.
into
That's like
that
a
as
full
well.
connection story.
Yeah. And actually, interesting part about all that is it worked. The experiment worked.
Yeah.
So
Why'd they go back?
capitalism.
Okay.
It was more because the other countries weren't doing it, and it was kind of an inconvenience.
That's fascinating. I love that watch even more now, knowing all that part of the story. That's great. So another fun watch that you own that I've yet to really even figure out how to get the bezel to work, I'm not gonna lie. But I know you were so excited to pick this up, and the story that you tell about its backstory, where it came from, why you fell in love with it, its quirkiness and everything.
Yes.
Is this Tudor, was it P01, is that right?
This is P01, yeah.
P01. It's such a, I remember when this was launched, and everyone was
everybody
like,
does.
what? They're like, what a crazy watch, that's terrible, this, that, and the other. And it is, without a doubt, kind of funky.
Yeah.
But funky in a good way, because you brought it over right after you got it, and I was like, I actually do kind of like it.
Right, and that's the thing, like, so on paper, like when you look at, like when you read the actual dimensions of the, you're like, this is stupid. Like, no, this is a completely unwearable watch. It's ridiculous, whatever. And I was at the an outdoor mall with the kids and the wife one day, and I don't know, they were doing something, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna, there was a jewelry store, and I was gonna duck in, and they had P01 there. I was like, let me try it on. And like once I actually handled it and tried it on, I had to have one.
Yeah. It's probably their only time they ever sold one.
Right, exactly, yeah.
They're like, who is this guy?
Somebody, we got somebody, yeah. And I get more comments on this watch when I'm wearing it than, and all positive, but like, it just, when people see it in person, they have a totally different reaction, I think, than what they expected to. Yeah. But what's fun about this watch is, one, like how much controversy it caused when it was released, because the idea of a watch causing controversy in general is just silly. But these watches like popped up in the early 2000s. People like, I can't believe this reputable auction house would sell an obviously fake Rolex. And there was about 20 years worth of debate on whether these, whenever they would randomly pop up on auction, whether they were actual real or fake. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Tudor just drops this release with like the original patents and the original models and everything.
I believe I was actually in Baselworld when it was released, and I remember seeing it behind the glass with, I think, one of the originals next to it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that is really weird.
And
everyone was so surprised, and everyone was, to what you said was correct.
Yeah.
There was a lot of controversy.
If you actually look at the original was actually longer. Mm-hmm. Like it had a kind of.
So they toned it down.
They toned it down.
They toned it down.
Yeah.
And then one of the first watches that I believe brought you
The
and I
first.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first one was this Oak and Oscar batch number 1.
Yes.
Which is such a fun piece to me, and it was something that was a new thing for us. And for folks that don't know, we do have effectively a watch line out there that we release every couple of years that are only for our owners and their drinking buddies. We call those the batches. We've done batch number 1, batch number 2, we'll do a batch number 3, and they're some of the most fun watches for me because they're kind of experimental, whether it's color, design, anything of that sort. But also it's something we don't market. You won't find it on our website. Right. Batch number 2, we have yet to even post anywhere online. Folks have posted theirs, which is fun. But as I'm looking at it, I'm also realizing, as we discussed this morning when we laid out these watches, you put your straps on backwards. And it's one of those scenarios where I looked at this like, wait, something's really off here. And your story was great as to why.
When I pick up my kids, and I would always hold them in my left hand, the buckle would dig into their thigh and they would complain about it. And so I started swapping the bands backwards so that the buckle was on the opposite side of my wrist and it wouldn't hit their thigh and scratch them or
it makes sense. And I think on video we should say to your kids, if they're watching this one day, your dad cares. And he does a lot of things for you, and that includes changing his entire way of wearing watches. Yeah. You didn't think maybe just like 1, you could put pants on them, or 2, switch arms? The entire strap system, changing that feels so wild.
Yeah.
And we have these all upside down. It's so wild.
Yeah.
And the grail piece that you picked up a while ago, which we all know and love, is the Omega Speedmaster. Right. Hesalite version with a very cool aftermarket display case back because it's a beautiful movement.
It's a gorgeous movement.
I've got a Speedmaster, the Sapphire Sandwich version, which shows the back off, and I don't understand why you cover up something like this. Right. So I like seeing the backside of these Speedmasters because they're just beautiful. Front side is too.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it's classic.
Yeah.
What drew you to the Speedmaster?
So I've always been fascinated with space travel. So of course, I had to have a moon watch. It's funny because when I picked this up, you could find the Alaska projects for like maybe $500 more.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I
love those white
So I love the white dye, but being nitpicky, if you look at the Alaska project, it's got the same loomed markers, but it doesn't have anything outlining them. So at a glance, it's not a very easily readable watch. And I was like, I like the white dial, but this little, just from a practicality sense, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go with the classic black dial. Now those Alaska projects are like 15 grand or something ridiculous.
It's crazy when a tiny little detail makes a person's preference.
Right.
And I get it, I understand.
Yeah.
And I think that's not a bad thing.
No.
If only you hadn't been so picky.
Yeah, well, but now I have.
But you love that piece.
I do. I have like an emotional attachment to it, a sentimental attachment. I had this watch on my wrist when all 3 of my daughters were born, and it's I wore this watch a ton. I wore it mountain bike and cyclocross racing for years. The bezel popped off, but it's cool. Wally Schirra had his like that, which is kind of a cool nod to the early NASA space race era. And I like the way it looks. It's kind of a cool, cleaner look, so I never bothered to put it back on. I sold a bunch of other watches that I had just to like, I'm gonna get this one.
You consolidated into a speed.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm gonna have another watch that like I really wanted like that much or, that helped.
You say that now.
I say that.
You got a lot of years left.
Yeah.
And then you have a fascination with Snoopy.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think you picked up a really fun piece to kind of honor your Snoopy love. This is the Bamford Snoopy Titanium.
It's the Midnight Snoopy, as they refer to it, yes. And that kind of ties into my love for, the space, just the fascination with that in general. So I grew up living with my mom, my grandparents. There was a bunch of like leftover comics and different books and records and things like that from my uncle in the attic, and he had a bunch of old Peanuts comics. So Snoopy was my favorite character, and I loved those old Peanuts comics. My grandfather was very fond of that as well. And when this watch came out with Snoopy, and then Woodstock kind of floating around him as a little astronaut. I had to have it. And a fun thing with the Bamford watch is the number 8 is engraved into each of the crowns. My grandfather, when he passed, he died on August 8th in 2008 at 8 o'clock, all 8s. So that number 8 has kind of been like a particular thing with me. I actually have a tattoo of a camera lens on my forearm from an old Pentax that he'd given me, the standard 50 millimeters. So I had him take the camera lens and I turned it into a tattoo on my forearm. And then as a nod to that, the number 8 is incorporated onto that camera lens 8 times.
Wow, that's great. And you're also not afraid of color. And this is one of our more fun straps that we've made is the, what we call the mustard.
Yeah, Team Mustard.
Canvas.
Hashtag
Team Mustard is great.
Right.
It's such a fun strap, and I love seeing this on our Olmsted mat. It's such a good look.
Yeah, I love the pairing of that, that charcoal gray mat with that pop of mustard. I think it pairs really well.
Another fun strap pairing, which of course, bunch straps are.
Yes.
Are you love them, you hate them, one of the two, but you can't say anything bad about the watch because an alarm watch is always fun.
Just from a practicality standpoint, again, I tend to be drawn to more functional watches. So I love the concept of, having an alarm. Like you gotta, traveling, you gotta get up in the morning to make a train. And really nobody does alarms better than Vulcain. But what was fun about this particular watch, this is the first alarm watch that I ever got. And my daughter went through this phase when she was maybe around 3 years old, my oldest, where it was, you would tell her like, okay, we're gonna shut the TV off in 5 minutes or 10 minutes until bedtime or whatever. She would always say, set an alarm. Can you set an alarm? We'd set an alarm on the phone or on the microwave or whatever. She was fixated on setting an alarm.
That's awesome.
So I'm like, I'm gonna get an alarm watch. This is gonna be great.
Great excuse to buy a new watch.
Of course, I have to. She loves the alarm thing. Right.
It makes sense.
And I got the alarm watch and I set the alarm and I was like, oh, this will be fun because she'd always play with my watches when she was, I'd be changing her diaper and I'd give her my watch to play with and she was always fascinated with the little second hand moving under the glass and trying to touch it. And so and the alarm went off. Absolutely hated the sound of it. To this day, she hears that alarm and she's like, shut that thing off. Hates the sound of it.
Well, I think that brings us to the rapid fire question section. You ready?
Yeah.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Germany.
Germany?
Yeah, love Germany. We have close family friends in Germany. My godson's in Germany, in Heidelberg.
Great.
Love it.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I overthink this one. I go to Comic-Con every year. I'm a nerd. Because I always think of the caveats. If I could fly, does that mean my body can withstand the altitudes of commercial air flight? How fast can I fly?
Rapid fire, Joe. Rapid fire.
I can't. Time travel? Is time travel a power?
Without a doubt.
Okay,
and
time travel.
It's a popular answer, which
I
makes
would go
sense.
time travel. Right. I would go back and say, buy all this Bitcoin or something like that.
Time travel.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite complication?
Alarm.
Yeah. That was
hands
easy.
down. Alarm's easy, yeah.
Great. Now, we normally ask a question of who would win in a fight, but for you, for some reason, I feel like I want to modify this.
Okay.
As a Chicagoan.
Yes.
Ketchup or no ketchup?
On what?
On a hot dog.
On a hot dog? No ketchup.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, I'm not
even had to ask on what?
Well, I don't know. Okay, so yes, the ketchup thing, it's a weird thing for me. Like I'll go no ketchup, right? I don't like to argue with the chef. I don't like to make modifications. If a classic.
Where are you getting a hot dog from a chef? I'm just gonna put that out there.
Hot dogs, tattoo number 3 on the inside of my arm. I was a big fan. So yes, I'd say a classic Chicago dog, no ketchup, eat it the way it's intended. But I will not turn my nose up at somebody who wants to put ketchup in that.
I think that's a great answer, and I completely agree. I'm totally with that, actually. Favorite drink?
Coffee. I'm gonna say coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah.
That's a necessary drink.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I have it every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah. Last question. How many date discs are in this
Okay.
jar?
All right, let me see. Okay. Can I just take them out and count them? How long do I have to answer this question?
You should have already answered.
Say 257.
All right. All right. Well, with that, cheers. Thank you so much for coming to the watch table.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
having
pleasure.
me.